Angelicus Welcome to episode 84, another exciting, scintillating episode of Spurbs Herb. Today we're going to be covering lemon balm or Melissa officinalis. So without further ado, let's get into it. Today's episode, we'll be looking at another herb of the world, lemon balm or Melissa officinalis. And I finally figured out what officinalis is. It's a very, very common subtype of species, of genuses, and I see it all the time, and I finally have what it means in Greek, so we're going to learn that today. But lemon balm is a relatively well-known medicinal and culinary herb with some very interesting traditional uses. As always, we will do our deep dive into this herb and look at its traditional uses and its preparations, interactions, and cautions. And as usual, we will be adding something a little different. We are going to look at hormones and how they work on the body. It's going to be another interesting vacation into the exciting continent of herbs. Please join us. Before we get going, I just want to remind everybody, I have been teaching for quite a while now on a wide variety of topics. If you like this podcast and want to explore more of my courses, they are available at www.integrativemedicinecouncil. That's all one word. Council is COUNCIL.org, not com.org, and include a ton of different topics, including my drug herb series, looking at drugs and how they interact with herbs and vice versa, several ethics and safety courses, Chinese medical research, several treatment of condition courses such as arthritis, neck and back pain, COVID, and depression and anxiety. And one of my favorite courses, the Chinese Herbal First Aid Kit. And they're all at a reasonable cost, and you get an additional 20% off with the code SH for Spurbs Herbs, SH20 off. That's SH20OFF, and that is all lowercase. So let's start our exploration of hormones. So hormones and endocrine signaling stand in contrast to neurotransmitters and neural signaling. Neural signaling uses electrical potentials and neurotransmitters to create very rapid and very limited in both time, so they happen in short periods of time, and location, only in very specific locations. So very rapid and very limited communication along neural pathways. These allow for quick, brief actions such as muscle contraction, sensation, and cognition. In contrast, hormones are released into the bloodstream, can provide wide body responses, is less specific, and is much slower. Hormones can act anywhere from a few seconds up to 48 hours. Now that few seconds might seem pretty quick, but neural signaling is usually in the millisecond range, so thousandth of a second range. So even a few seconds is several thousand times slower than neural signaling. Additionally, hormones can react to external stimuli as well as internal, while neural signaling really reacts only to internal stimuli. Hormones are created, stored, and released by the endocrine system. Endocrine glands, which are ductless, they do not have ducts, are the most important aspect of the endocrine system, though many, if not most, non-gland tissues can also display endocrine functions. In other words, they can make hormones as well. Hormones can have profound effects on the body and its tissues. A hormonal stimulus typically produces one or more of the following changes. One, alters plasma membrane permeability, so this is or membrane potential, or both, by opening or closing ion channels. So it actually allows things to flow in and out of the plasma membranes of cells. Stimulates synthesis of proteins or regulatory molecules such as enzymes within the cell. 3, it activates or deactivates enzymes. 4, it induces secretory activity. In other words, it makes something else get secreted. And 5, it can stimulate mitosis, which is actually cell division. So it can stimulate cell division as well. So there's a lot of different things that it can actually, a lot of different issues, a lot of different possibilities of how hormones act. Before we get any more specific, we should discuss hormones in the context of Chinese medicine. Well, we say we should. I say we should because this has a bent towards Chinese medicine and alternative medicine in general. Hormones are a relatively new discovery in medicine, and Chinese medicine did not and does not have specific notions of hormones. In general, hormones are said to be related to kidney yin and yang. However, I think this is too simplistic. The actions of hormones are often included, if not explicit, in our Chinese understanding of organ actions. So when we go through what each organ does, it kind of has some of the flavor of hormones as well. So for example, if you look at some of the kidney functions, they're definitely can be related to some of the corticosteroid hormones that are part of the adrenal glands, neck right on top of the kidneys. Let's talk about types of hormones. So basically, there are two types of hormones, amino acid and lipid. Amino acid hormones are synthesized from amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins, and can be categorized as one of three types. Amine hormones are modified amino acids, primarily tryptophan and tyrosine. Those are two of approximately the 21 or 22 amino acids that are commonly found in the body. Peptide hormones are short chains of multiple amino acids. So once you start hooking them together, they're peptide hormones. And then we have protein hormones, are long chains of amino acids. And of course, amino acids are what make up proteins and help us build a large portion of our body. Lipid hormones are the other type, and lipid hormones are primarily steroid-based. Steroids are formed from cholesterol. They are very hydrophobic and need to be transported in the blood with plasma proteins, often albumin. Generally, amino acid hormones have a much shorter life than lipid-based hormones. Let's talk a little bit about these steroids. We said they're steroid hormones. And cholesterol is the major steroid alcohol. Alcohol just means it has an OH group, a hydroxyl group somewhere. So cholesterol is the major steroid alcohol in animals and is part of the structure of cell membranes, a precursor to bile acids, steroid hormones, which is what we're talking about today, and vitamin D. Cholesterol is comprised of a steroid nucleus of 4 hydrocarbon rings, which are labeled A through D, a hydroxyl group, which is OH at carbon 3, an 8-carbon chain attached to carbon 17, and a double bond between carbons 5 and 6. Okay, that's all kind of technical organic chemistry stuff, but that's technically what a steroid is. Let's talk briefly about hormone action pathways. There are basically 2 types of pathways explaining how hormones act on the body. These are pathways which either use cell membrane hormone receptors or those that use intracellular receptors. So either a receptor that's attached to the cell membrane and actually usually goes through the cell membrane. And then there's some that just totally bypass the cell membrane. The steroid hormones can, because they're very hydrophobic, which means they don't like water, they do like fat, and our cell membrane is mostly fat. It allows it to go straight through the cell membrane. And so then there are intracellular receptors for them. Cell membrane receptors are usually how hydrophilic, those that, technically that means loving water. So those who like water, hormones, so these are hydrophilic hormones, act on the cells as they cannot diffuse through the phospholipid bilayer of the cell membrane. Remember, that's how our cell membrane is laid out. It's called a phospholipid bilayer, and it has phospho, which is hydrophilic on the outside, lipids on the inside, and water doesn't want to pass through that, which is good. Otherwise, all our water in our cells would leak out. So we want that barrier there. After activation of the membrane receptor, a second messenger system is activated, most often a G protein system. That's what this second messenger system is called. G protein receptors are comprised of a receptor that spans the plasma membrane of the cell and is attached to a G protein on the inside of the cell. A ligand, or in this case, we're talking about the hormone. A ligand is just anything that attaches to a receptor. So a ligand binds the receptor, which causes the alpha subunit to bind GTP, which is guanosine triphosphate, and dissociate into two intracellular components, the alpha GTP subunit and the beta gamma subunit. So this is a little technical, but basically what happens is you have a receptor, causes a conformational change that allows GTP to be bound and to dissociate two subcomponents from that G protein. These can interact with other molecules to exert their influence on the cell. These other molecules are called second messenger systems. Three most common of these second messenger systems are the cyclic adenosine monophosphate, or the CAMP, cyclic AMP system, the IP3 system, and the diacylglycerol system. Again, this is getting into some pretty good biochemistry, so we're not going to get too far into it here. But here's the bottom line with these second messenger systems and why they're so important. Second messenger systems tend to magnify the effect of the initial activation, as each step of the cascade acts on several other chemicals, not just one. This means one G protein activation can affect hundreds or thousands of proteins, and this process is called amplification. And that's why these G protein receptors are really important, and how just a little hormone, a little chemical can have a huge effect is because of this amplification. So let's talk about intracellular receptors, the other main type of receptors for hormones. These receptors remain completely within the cell in the cytosol, which is the inside of the cell, basically the fluid inside the cell. This means a drug needs to be lipophilic enough, which means it needs to be fat-loving enough to pass through the cell membrane, because it's mostly fat, in order to bind with the receptor. Once bound, the drug receptor complex moves into the nucleus of the cell, which is where the DNA is stored, and promotes DNA transcription to messenger RNA, and ultimately increases protein synthesis. Messenger RNA goes off and that sort of becomes the blueprint for proteins. So mRNA is very important. Steroid hormones are common ligands for these receptors, which is why we're talking about them. And that pretty much concludes our introduction to hormones. Nice little introduction. And so with that intro to hormones, let's get into today's herb. That was our little something different. So today we're talking about Melissa officinalis, or lemon balm. It comes from the family Lamiaceae, which we've actually had several herbs now that are in this family. It's a great family. We're going to find out a little bit more about it in just a minute. The species is Melissa officinalis L. L, if you remember, refers to the biologist, and in this case, this refers to Linnaeus, who's actually kind of considered the first. He's not the first botanist or biologist, but he's the one who kind of created this binomial system that we use. So whenever you see L, it was like one of the first species that was actually put into the system. So this is originally there. The medicinal part of lemon balm is mostly the leaves. Most things are the leaves, though the whole plant can be used medicinally as well. Other names for this is just balm. So forget lemon balm, it's just balm. Or bee balm is a very common. We'll see bee a lot, and we're going to find out why that is in just a few. So bee balm, bee herb, blue balm, Melissa balm, balm mint. Why is it mint? We're going to find that out too. Common balm, cure-all. Sometimes it's just called cure-all. This was considered a cure-all. It could help everything. Dropsy plant, honey plant, sweet balm, sweet Mary, English balm, garden balm, and this is one of my favorites, Heart's Delight. Like that for this. All right, let's talk briefly about the family, and then we'll get back to the herb specifically. So the Lamiaceae family includes flowering plants commonly known as the mint, dead nettle, or sage family. Right there you can see why balm mint might be one of the names, is it's in the mint family. Generally, Lamiaceae is considered the more correct name, though Labiatae is a correct alternative. These have hundreds of years of history and name changes, so sometimes you'll see things like this. But right now, Lamiaceae is the more correct name, though you will still sometimes hear Labiatae. These include many aromatic culinary and medicinal herbs, including basil, mint, rosemary. Rosemary is interesting because we don't really discuss it very much, but one of the components of lemon balm is rosmarinic acid. So that actually is one of the chemicals contents from rosemary. Sage, savory, marjoram, oregano, hyssop, thyme, lavender, salvia, catnip, oriental motherwort, and perilla. So we've had a lot of these in our conversations on herbs. There are approximately 236 genera and up to 7,500 species. And the flowers are usually bisexual, so they have both sexes in it. So that's just a little bit on the Lamiaceae family. Let's get into a little bit of the history. And this is where I've referred to a few things. So Melissa means bee in Greek. So this actually means bee. So that's why you saw bee so many times in the English names, some of the common names, is because Melissa means bee. And officinalis, and the reason why this is over and over again when you read up on this, it's thought that if you plant lemon balm, it will, well, we're going to see this in just a second, that bees will be attracted to it. So that's why bee is such an important part. Bees are such an important part of this herb. And so Melissa and officinalis, I love learning this, means used in medicine. So that's why a lot of the herbs, the medicinal herbs that we see, end in officinalis as the species name, because they are used in medicine. So that's cool. Got to learn something new there. Lemon balm has a documented history over 2,000 years old, where it was used medicinally by the Greeks and Romans and was written about in Theophrastus's Historia Plantarum in 300 BCE. That predates written herb that we have today, written herb references in China. The first ones are about 200 CE, so that's about 400 or 500 years before in China. The first century Roman Pliny the Elder wrote about planting it near beehives as it would encourage bees to return. So you can see from very early this has been associated with bees. It was brought to Spain by the Moors in the 7th century. Many accounts of the medicinal uses of this herb are found during the Middle Ages throughout Europe and the Persian and Arab world. This included a discussion of its antidepressant properties by the famous Persian physician Avicenna, who we've discussed in one of our Something Little Different. The English botanist Nicholas Culpeper, who lived from 1616 to 1654, said lemon balm was good for melancholy and digestion. The London Dispensary in 1696 stated, "An essence of balm given in canary wine every morning will renew youth, strengthen the brain, relieve languishing nature, and prevent baldness." So they were still, back then, trying to prevent baldness, which I find very funny, especially as a bald man. Here's an excerpt from Nicholas Culpeper's The Complete Herbal, which is kind of considered, if you're studying European herbs, this is kind of considered, an important tome, older tome. So here's what it says. "This herb is so well known to be an inhabitant in almost in every garden that I shall not need to write any description thereof, although its virtues, which are many, may not be omitted. Under government and virtues of this herb, it is an herb of Jupiter, and under cancer, it strengthens nature much in all its actions. Let a syrup made with the juice of it and sugar, as you shall be taught at the later end of this book, be kept in every gentlewoman's house to relieve the weak stomachs and sick bodies of their poor sickly neighbors. As also the herb kept dry in the house, that so with other convenient simples, you may make it into an electuary with electuary, 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 with honey, according as the disease is, you shall be taught at the later end of my book. The Arabian physicians have extolled the virtues thereof to the skies, although the Greeks thought it not worth mentioning. Serapio says it causes the mind and heart to become merry and revives the heart, faintings and swoonings, especially of such who are overtaken in sleep, and drives away all troublesome cares and thoughts out of the mind, arising from melancholy or black choler, black choler, which Avicen, that's the same Avicena that we mentioned earlier, also confirms. It is very good to help digestion and open obstructions of the brain, and hath so much purging quality in it, saith Avicen, as to expel those melancholy vapors from the spirits and blood which are in the heart and arteries, although it cannot do so in other parts of the body. Dioscorides says that the leaves steeped in wine and the wine drank and the leaves externally applied is a remedy against the stings of a scorpion and the bitings of mad dogs, and commands the decoction thereof for women to bathe or sit in to procure their courses, which means menstruation. It is good to wash aching teeth therewith, and profitable for those that have the bloody flux. The leaves also with a little niter taken in drink are good against the surfeit of mushrooms, and there was too many mushrooms, helps the griping pains of the belly, or sometimes I hear griping, but it also gripping pains of the body, of the belly, and being made into an electuary, it is good for them that cannot fetch their breath. Used with salt, it takes away wens, kernels, or hard swellings in the flesh or throat, cleanses foul sores, and eases pains of the gout. It is good for the liver and spleen. A tansy or candle made with eggs and juice thereof while it is young, putting to it some sugar and rose water, is good for a woman in childbirth, when the afterbirth is not thoroughly voided, and for their faintings upon or in their sore travail. The herb bruised and boiled in a little wine and oil, and laid warm on a boil, will ripen it and break it. Wow, that was a lot, and that's interesting. This was written 1653-ish, so this is 375 years old. That's quite a lot. Other uses of this herb. Lemon balm has many uses other than the medicinal ones we're about to explore. It is an ornamental plant. Its essential oil can be an ingredient in perfume, and it can be used in toothpaste. It's also used as a culinary herb, especially in fish dishes, and as the main ingredient in lemon balm pesto, which sounds delicious. The Herb Society of America says it can be used in many different types of dishes, from beverages to appetizers, main courses, and desserts. It can be added to salads, sandwiches, soups, stews, butters, cheeses, fish, stuffings for poultry, pork, and veal, egg dishes, vegetables, fruit cups, jams, jellies, sauces, marinades, dressings, herb vinegar, wine, punch, cakes, custards, tarts, sorbets, ice cream, cookies, crepes, pies, and cheesecakes. And now I'm hungry. The Herb Society of America also discusses its use in crafts such as potpourri and sleep pillows and floral arrangements, and cosmetics such as in homemade toiletries, so soaps and washes and things along those lines. So it has lots of other uses. All right, let's get into its traditional uses. One of my sources for this is the PDR for Herbal Medicines, which I really like. It's a very large book with a good scientific basis to it. PDR is something I remember back in the day, always as someone interested in medicine, that it's called the Physician's Desk Reference. That's what it refers to. And the original PDR was all about drugs. So if you had a question on a drug, you go to the PDR and have all the information there. And so the PDR was that. So here's a PDR for Herbal Medicines. And it says it was approved by Commission E for nervousness and insomnia. So if you're not, we've mentioned Commission E multiple times on this podcast. Commission E was commissioned in Europe in, I believe, the 90s, maybe as early as the 80s. And it was designed to look at did these herbs actually do what it said to do? So when it's approved by commissioning, it says there's enough evidence to say that it may do something for these things. It's not definitive, and now we consider it a bit older. It has not been kept updated, but still, commissioning, if it's approved, means that it can be easily sold in Europe, and so that's a pretty big hurdle for an herb to overcome at this point. So commissioning approval is useful and is still relatively important sort of thing, though newer herbs would not have the ability to get approved by commissioning because it's no longer around. But this was, and so this was approved by commissioning for nervousness and insomnia. PDR says unproven uses include in folk medicine, the drug is utilized as decoctions of the flowering shoots for nervous complaints, lower abdominal disorders, meteorism, which I'm not sure what that is. I meant to look that up, but man, that's a term I haven't heard, meteorism. Nervous gastric complaints, hysteria and melancholia, chronic bronchial catarrh, which is a cough, nervous palpitations, vomiting, migraine, nervous debility, headache, and high blood pressure. It is used externally for rheumatism, nerve pains, and stiff necks, and it has in parentheses compress, so as a compress for stiff necks. The Herb Society of America says, although it has been used primarily for depression and anxiety, insomnia and dyspepsia, the long list of maladies for which lemon balm has traditionally been used also include bronchitis, asthma, coughs, fever, menstrual problems, hypertension, migraines, shock, vertigo, eczema and skin problems, gout, insect bites and stings, snake bites, and skin infections. Some even believe the plant would remedy baldness, as we mentioned when we read Nicholas Culpepper's comments. WebMD says this herb can be used for cold sores, anxiety, stress, insomnia, indigestion, dementia, and many other conditions. Now, dementia is interesting. There was a relatively recent study that said it could actually be helpful in dementia. We're going to talk about that when we talk about science in just a little bit. Drugs.com had an entry on it. Drugs.com doesn't have a lot of entries on herbs. When it does, it's usually a more commonly used herb. So drugs.com says it may help decrease stress and agitation in patients with dementia and Alzheimer's disease, lower cholesterol, and herpes, help herpes as well. So there's a lot of stuff. Mount Sinai Health, which again is a pretty prominent healthcare thing, adds it may help with insomnia and anxiety. And finally, Healthline says it can also help menstrual cramps, toothaches, and headaches. So lots of different sort of traditional uses and maybe a little bit more modern uses as well. Let's talk about its dosage and preparation. According to the PDR for herbal medicines, dosage should be 395 milligrams in capsule form. To prepare an infusion, pour 1 cup of hot water over 1.5 to 4.5 grams of the drug and strain after 10 minutes. So in other words, steep it for 10 minutes. The average daily dose is 1.5 to 4.5 grams of drug. That's according to the PDR for herbal medicines. Mount Sinai says the following about dosing of this herb for adults. Capsules take 300 to 500 milligrams dried lemon balm 3 times daily or as needed. Tea, 1.5 to 4.5 grams, which is a quarter to 1 teaspoon of dried lemon balm herb in hot water. Steep and drink up to 4 times daily. As a tincture, 60 drops of lemon balm daily. I don't like this as a dosage because tinctures can be in lots of different strengths. And so I don't know what 60 drops of lemon balm daily means. I don't know what strength they're talking about as a tincture. So I think that is gobbledygook. Gobbledygook, not bobbledygook. Though I like bobbledygook. Maybe I'll say that from now on. Topical, they say apply topical cream to affected area 3 times daily or as directed. WebMD says lemon balm is available in many forms, including supplements, combination products, lotions, ointments, massage oils, and others. There isn't enough reliable information to know what an appropriate dose of lemon balm might be. Keep in mind that natural products are not always necessarily safe and dosages can be important. Be sure to follow relevant directions on product labels and consult a healthcare professional before using. WebMD, I think, tends to be a little bit more on the conservative side on some of these things. So basically what they're saying is, we don't know, be careful. All right, that's fine. But what was interesting about it is all the different products. It's in a lot of different products out there. The Energetics of Western Herbs, a Materia Medica integrating Western and Oriental herb medicine traditions, Volume 2, says this herb should be used in the following doses: as an infusion, 8 to 16 grams. As a tincture, see this as a tincture makes a lot more sense to me. It says 2 to 5 milliliters at 1,3 strength and 45% alcohol. So that gives me enough information to create a tincture and to be able to use it at this dosing. Just saying 60 drops of a tincture doesn't tell me anything about the strength, how much lemon balm there is in there. Essential oil, use 1 drop in a gel cap topped with some olive oil. And I'm assuming that means, because it's in a gel cap, internally. So that's an interesting one. And the essential oils are important for this herb. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but not usually the way I would take something. I always like to talk about quality of the herbs we're talking about. And unfortunately, it was difficult to find anything on what makes good quality lemon balm. I put it in to both Google and Google Scholar to see if I can come up with some what is good quality lemon balm. Now, I can't tell you, because I take photos of these herbs. I order these herbs online. There was sometimes when you order herbs, they'll say, okay, this is grade A, this is grade C. They'll talk about grading of it. There was nothing like that with lemon balm. It all seemed, most of what I found with lemon balm was kind of chopped up leaves and maybe a little bit of stems in it. So it was, you basically you're looking for nice green and clean sort of stuff as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know if anything was really discernible as to what was good quality or poor quality with this. So let's get into Chinese medical actions. Because this is such a popular Western herb, there's a lot on Chinese medicine for this. So one source says this herb is Xiang Feng Sao in Chinese. It was the only source that there was another source that used the same term, but a lot of the language was the same as this website. So I feel like they copied it from this website, so I don't consider it a separate source. So this is the only source that actually, had a Chinese name for this, Xian Feng Cao. And while I cannot be sure due to lack of tone marks and characters, I think this translates as fragrant wind grass. Well, Xiang usually means fragrant, and is usually, we're going to find out that most of the sources say this is, in Chinese, say this is an aromatic herb. It makes sense. It is quite an aromatic herb. And Xiang is often the fragrant is how that's often described. So it makes sense. I think fragrant wind grass is probably correct, but I can't be for sure as the translation of it. The source from the White Rabbit Institute of Healing, this source from the White Rabbit Institute of Healing goes on to say lemon balm is slightly bitter, aromatic, sour, and slightly cooling, and enters the stomach and heart. I have used White Rabbit Institute of Healing before as a source of Chinese medical approaches to Western herbs, and I think it's a pretty good one. I don't think there's anything definitive on a lot of this, so I can't say it's a definitive source, but I can say it's a decent source for this information. Its actions, according to them, are cooling and drying, calms Shen, moves qi, sedates spasms, releases to the exterior, restores Jing or essence, harmonizes labor, stops bleeding, restrains infection, clears parasites. That's a lot of actions for this. Like I said, it's a cure-all. Another one that I kind of think is a decent source for this is ChineseNutrition.org, and it says it's bitter, sour, and cold. It enters the lung, heart, kidney, liver, and pericardium. The source did not include any Chinese actions of this herb. Yet another source, Jur Herbals, adds a lot more confusion to the Chinese properties of this herb by saying it is warm. So all the others have said it's cool and cold. This says it's warm and spicy and enters the lung and liver. It says its Chinese actions include warms the interior and expels cold, and the spicy and pungent components help dry dampness and circulate qi, energy, and bodily fluids. Due to its unique qualities, lemon balm is an excellent option for resolving internal coldness with qi and yang deficiency. So I disagree with this. I don't. I think looking at a whole bunch of different sources, they all tend to say this is cooling or cold. This is the only source that says it's warming. And I'm not sure it's a good source, but I threw it in there for some controversy. Then there's that book that we mentioned earlier, The Energetics of Western Herbs and Materia Medica, Integrating Western and Oriental Herbal Medicine Traditions by Holmes, which is a 2-volume book. It's got a lot of Western herbs, a lot of information, and a lot of good information, though I think sometimes it's a little overblown. But let's see what it says. Holmes says lemon balm is somewhat bitter, sour, and astringent, cool and dry, and enters the heart, pericardium, triple burner, lung, liver, kidney, and bladder. And he has 6 different groupings of functions. Grouping 1, relaxes constraint, calms the mind and relieves anxiety, sinks the yang, clears heat, reduces fever and allergy. 2, regulates the qi and relieves pain, balances circulation, and harmonizes digestion, menstruation, and urination. 3, restores the nerves, lifts the mind, and relieves depression. 4, promotes sweating, dispels wind heat, and reduces fever, promotes expectoration, and resolves phlegm. 5, tonifies reproductive qi and harmonizes labor and enhances delivery. And 6, reduces contusion and swelling and stops bleeding, reduces infection and eliminates parasites, reduces tumors. So those are his 6 groupings of functions. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't like all these different approaches to the Chinese medicalization of lemon balm. I think a lot of these are not definitive. A lot of them are overblown. I think there's just way too much that is going on with this. So I'm going to give my opinion and simplify it based on traditional uses of this herb. It's my opinion. So, take it or leave it with this. I have a question. Any info on parts of the herbs used? Yeah, I mentioned at the very beginning that it's primarily the leaves, though the whole herb can be used. So thank you for the question. I appreciate it. Yeah. Okay, so here's my take on this. It seems like this herb should enter the heart for its calming effects, the spleen for its digestion effects, the liver for its antidepressant effects, and lungs for its anti-asthmatic and skin effects. So I would say it enters the heart, spleen, liver, and lungs. Now, some said kidneys, and I don't see that very much, so I don't agree with that. Being cooling, I said most sources say it's cooling, seems to be in line with helping with calming and skin issues. Its Chinese function should be calm the heart and mind, move qi, and support the lung and spleen qi and aid digestion. So that's my simplification of everything that goes on. And I think that kind of covers most, if not all, of the traditional uses of this herb, at least from a Chinese medical perspective. Comparisons and combinations of this herbs. Well, generally there weren't any direct comparisons for this herb, and not a lot of combinations in our literature searches. However, we did see a couple places combining with valerian root was mentioned as helping with relaxing the mind and helping with insomnia. And that seems like a really nice combination. Valerian root is very helpful for insomnia. And I think this adds a lot of anti-anxiety and helping with insomnia as well. So that seems like a really nice combination. Again, it was mentioned on a couple sources, not super major, just like, oh, and this is sometimes combined with, and that's it. And that was the only thing that was ever mentioned with a combination of this herb. Contents of this herb. So the Herb Society of America has an excellent passage on the contents of lemon balm. And here's the quote from there. Although over 100 chemicals have been identified in Melissa officinalis, the main components of the essential oil are citral, which are neural and geraniol. Those are the actual essential oils. Citronellol, so it's AL on the end. Linalool, geraniol, and beta caryophyllene oxide, beta caryophyllene oxide. Evans, which is a pharmacology book, says lemon balm yields only a small quantity of volatile oil, which is the same thing as an essential oil, and it says 0.06 to 0.4% are volatile oils, which nonetheless give the plant, when crushed, its strong lemon-like odor. Principal components of the oil are the aldehyde citral, composed of the isomers geraniol and nerol, and citronellol. So they mention basically the same things as was mentioned by the Herb Society of America, but it explains that geraniol and nerol are actually isomers of citral. So they're all very, very closely related. Vidal, McCreath, and Clement, which is a pharmacognosy book as well, agree with these ingredients and adds a few: citral, nerol, citronellol, beta caryophyllene, all those we've talked about, but adds germacrine D and ursolic and oleanolic acids. The Herb Society of America also says lemon balm contains flavonoids, which can have an antioxidant effect. Other phytochemicals in lemon balm which may provide antioxidant activity include phenolic acids, terpenes, rosmarinic acid. Remember I mentioned rosmarinic action when we mentioned rosemary was in the same family, and caffeic acids as well. Lemon balm also contains tannins, which are astringent and contribute to lemon balm's antiviral effects, and eugenol acetate, which is believed to be one of the phytochemicals responsible for lemon balm's reported antispasmodic effects, so helping spasms. They also say it contains vitamin C and thiamine, which is one of the vitamin Bs. A lot of contents there. Let's talk a little bit about the science of this herb. Vidal, McCreath, and Clement, which is that pharmacognosy textbook, says lemon balm is antispasmodic, sedative, antimicrobial, and antiviral, which I find to be same thing. You know, if you have antimicrobial, it's also antiviral, but okay. What is nice about this herb is there appears to be several systematic reviews, the highest level of evidence looking at various medicinal claims. I love that. I don't often get to see systematic reviews on herbs. So when I see them, I think that's important because they are the highest level of evidence. One review looked at the use of lemon balm in relation to obstetrics and gynecology, summarizing their results. In total, 15 studies were included. M. officinalis appears to be useful in pain reduction, childbirth after pain and primary dysmenorrhea. So that's dysmenorrhea is painful menses, improving premenstrual symptoms and postpartum blues. However, no effect was seen on the intensity of menstrual bleeding, and effectiveness was mixed in relation to sexual functioning and menopausal related symptoms. Due to selection bias in almost all studies, the evidence level of the included studies was considered a high risk of bias. They continue to conclude this intervention might have benefits for gynecological conditions, but it is not strongly supported by the available evidence. So systematic reviews, one of the things it does is it doesn't just look at a study and says, oh, it does this, it's really good. It kind of looks at the methodology of that study as well as other studies that are saying similar things. And so the conclusion here was there's some evidence, but it's not strong evidence at this point for obstetrics and gynecology, which, you know, frankly is pretty good for an herb. You know, most herbs don't have strong, at this point, have strong studies for it. So that's not bad. A narrow review of lemon balm and other herbs' effects on dementia found among 8 articles identified on lemon balm, 7 studies found it effective in improving mood or cognition with dementia. So that's good. Told you we'd talk a little bit about dementia earlier. A systematic review and meta-study, which again, systematic reviews, I think are considered a subtype of meta-study or vice versa. I can never keep that straight in my head. But a meta-study kind of combines the information from several studies and kind of uses the same information and redoes the statistics to come up with like a larger study. So that's, again, it's considered very similar to a systematic review, a very high level of evidence. So the systematic review and meta-study looked at the effects of lemon balm on cardiometabolic effects and found intake was associated with a reduced total cholesterol and a reduced systolic blood pressure. Those are good things. However, intake was not associated with statistically significant changes in triglycerides, low-density lipoprotein, LDL, the bad cholesterol, diastolic blood pressure, high-sensitivity C-reactive protein levels, fasting blood sugar, HbA1c, which is a measure of long-term sugar control, insulin or high-density lipoprotein, HDL, which is the good cholesterol levels. So it didn't do a lot when it came to cardiometabolic issues. And another systematic review and meta-study found, based on meta-analysis results, lemon balm significantly improved mean anxiety and depression scores compared with the placebo. However, they did warn, due to the high level of heterogeneity between studies, results should be interpreted with caution. In other words, high level of heterogeneity between studies means that they're all very different studies and they're hard to combine. So you got to take the results with caution. And I did look at a Cochrane Library database search, did not yield any reviews about lemon balm. Cochrane Library database is usually pretty good about systematic reviews, and it's a pretty good resource. So, and nothing was there. So overall, if you look at the science of this, I gotta say, I mean, some of this sounds kind of negative. Some of this, like this last one, the results should be interpreted with caution. If it doesn't say that, it's a bad review. They all say that, basically, unless it's just a out of the park sort of review. So that doesn't bother me. I would say that looking at the science, this is relatively positive. Like you rarely get this level of positive science from herbs. And so pretty good, even though not perfect and not, thing. But what I take away from all this is definitely for anxiety and depression, it seems to be really good. And it might be helpful on some of these other things we mentioned as well. Let's talk about drug-herb interactions. There are some opinions that lemon balm may be synergistic with some antidepressants and especially anxiolytics, but there does not appear to be any issues in the literature. So this, you'll have, people who will give opinions on drug-herb interactions, and they will say things like this: this herb is good for depression and for anxiety, therefore there's a possibility that it might, act in some way with antidepressants and anxiolytics, which help anxiety, and therefore we need to be careful about drug-herb interactions. Well, okay, I guess on a surface level that is correct, but there's no evidence really of that being the case. And so I wouldn't worry about it. And it does seem like people are taking antidepressants and anxiolytics with this herb and not having major issues with that combination, though, that wasn't specifically looked at, so I'm not advocating for that. But I don't think there's any evidence that there's some issue here. And that's important to me, is that there's some evidence. One study looked at the in vitro effects of herbs, including lemon balm, on the metabolism of tamoxifen. The study found both lemon balm and skullcap may interfere with the bioactivation of tamoxifen. However, this was not a clinical study. So in vitro means in glass, in test tubes, in experiments, not in vivo, which means in life, which means animals or humans, and it's not clinical, which means in humans. So just because something does something when you combine it in a test tube does not mean it's going to do the same thing when it's taken in human form. So if I were taking tamoxifen, I'll be honest with you, if I was taking tamoxifen, I'd be very cautious of adding any herbs into that regimen. That's an anti-cancer agent. I'd be very careful about adding anything into a tamoxifen regimen. Not that I wouldn't, but I'd be very careful. And so this study, just adds a little bit more to that caution, but it does not, to me, mean that there is this issue in humans. It's D-level evidence, lowest level of evidence there is for an interaction. 2 studies specifically state there were no significant risk of interaction in the literature. So that's interesting. So 2 other studies that went through the literature, just like I did. Maybe was probably not as in depth as these 2 studies. They both came out and said there doesn't seem to be any interactions here to be worried about in the literature for now. One of my great sources for safety is the American Herbal Products Association's Botanical Safety Handbook. And it puts this herb in interaction class A, their highest level of interaction class A, which means by highest, I mean best, like least likely. And interaction class A says herbs for which no clinically relevant interactions are expected. So as far as they're concerned, pretty darn safe for interactions. Concerns. Are there any concerns for this herb? So according to the PDR for herbal medicines, no health hazards or side effects are known in conjunction with the proper administration of designated therapeutic dosages. A discussion of liver toxic herbs by the National Institutes of Health says in small trials, lemon balm extracts have appeared to be well tolerated with only a few minor adverse non-specific effects such as headache, dizziness, bloating, which often have been similar in frequency among persons receiving the placebo. Despite wide-scale use as an herbal supplement, lemon balm extract has not been linked to published instances of clinically apparent liver injury. So this was specific about liver. So no issues for the liver there. WebMD, which remember I said is a little bit more on the conservative side, says lemon balm supplements are possibly safe when used at a dose of up to 500 milligrams daily for up to 6 months. Side effects are generally mild and might include increased appetite, nausea, dizziness, and wheezing. There isn't enough reliable information to know if lemon balm is safe to use for more than 6 months. It may cause skin irritation. There isn't enough reliable information to know if lemon balm is safe to use when pregnant or breastfeeding. And they say stay on the safe side and avoid use in the cases of pregnancy or breastfeeding. And finally, the American Herbal Products Association's Botanical Safety Handbook puts this herb in safety class 1. Again, their safest class. And safety class 1 says herbs that can be safely consumed when used appropriately. So there doesn't seem to be many concerns here. There's a few issues maybe, but most of the side effects seem pretty straightforward. I think this is a pretty darn safe herb to be looking at. And again, I wouldn't have any questions about giving this herb to a patient. Well, that is it for this episode. Wrapping up, we started our discussion today with a look at hormones and how they work on the body. From there, we did our deep dive into lemon balm or Melissa officinalis, one of the most commonly used herbs used to help depression, anxiety, and gastrointestinal issues, among other ailments. It was once considered a cure-all. It has a very long history of use and appears to be quite safe. Overall, another helpful herb. I got to say, after doing this, I certainly would not hesitate in offering this herb. I have been after I did our deep dive into valerian root. I don't know how many episodes ago. I have suggested that to a few patients, and this, I don't have any problem suggesting this for depression, anxiety, and insomnia. So I think this is another useful herb. I don't know how strong an herb it is, but it did seem to have some pretty good effects on depression, anxiety. And if you have effects on depression, anxiety, often you will help insomnia as well. So I think this is great. For me, as an acupuncturist and herbalist, I probably wouldn't use it for gastrointestinal issues because that kind of is where we live in Chinese medicine. So I'd probably stick to my Chinese medicine for that. But for depression, anxiety, this certainly might become part of my toolkit. I think it's a really interesting herb. In our next episode, we will be exploring another interesting Chinese herb, Niobangzi, or Arctii fructus, Niobangzi, Arctii fructus, or great burdock fruit. This herb is in the Chinese medical subcategory of cool acrid herbs that release the exterior under the category of release the exterior herbs. It is helpful for certain types of colds, sore throats, and as a seed can help constipation. And as usual, we will be exploring something a little different. Please join us for this intriguing episode. See you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you like this podcast, would you do us a humongous favor? Give us a 5-star rating in your favorite podcast app or subscribe. We'd love for you to subscribe, and we thank you for even considering doing that. And remember, you can get continuing education units and National Certification Commission of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine professional development activities at www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org. That's Integrative Medicine Council, COUNCIL.org. Don't forget that 20% off with the code SH20OFF. Spurbs Herbs SH20 off. And you can always get in touch with me at Dr. Greg at spurbsherbs.com or at our website, www.spurbsherbs.com. That's SPERBSHERBS.com. We Americans have a silent H there, which I know very well because I taught this in Australia and they would make fun of me. So Spurbs, it says, we say Spurbs Herbs, but they would say Spurbs Herbs. So there we go. Thank you very much. And as usual, have quite the bibliography. Thank you very much. Hope to see you again soon.
Spurbs Herbs.
The proceeding was presented by Dr. Greg Sperber. We would like to thank Janelle for all her support and everybody else who contributed to this program.
Janelle.
Timothy
Thompson.
Dobbins.
Rogers.
Campbell.